Religion, science, myths, and legends all point toward the next evolution in human consciousness. What do the invisible realms hold? Who's telling us and how do they know? We're investigating insights from around the world to answer the question, what does the material world arise out of and where do we go once we've dropped the body? You're about to go interdimension with Robert Wallace to undiscovered spiritual realities.
Welcome to Spiritual Realities. I'm Robert Wallace, and today we're going to talk about vision boards a little bit. We're going to talk about interdimensional states of conscious awareness, the attainment thereof, things that can be experienced if your heart is in the right place. So stay with us. Here we go. All right, Robert Wallace at the helm again. So spiritualrealities.net, no longer on The Voice, 105.9 FM in Memphis. We're moving to Chicago. All right. Hey, I still have a sense of humor. I'm working on it. Okay, I'll get rid of it. I'll be a bitter, tired monk eventually if I just keep aspiring. Okay, but meanwhile, even in our imperfection, there's still spiritual realms which can be experienced, even by the wacky, imperfect ones among us. So today we're going to talk about vision boards for just a second. So without a vision, the people perish. We got to remember in our pursuit for spirituality that the attainment of things is not the reason why we're alive. Now, God does give us the desires of our hearts. And he says that without a vision, the people perish. So maybe you want a city with an infrastructure that feeds the people so they don't perish. You need a vision for that. What do people do when they want to start a company or they have a goal or objective? They create a vision board. They create an org board. They create a mission statement. These sorts of things. We can do this in our own life also. Of course, to a certain degree, the practice of this, universalist type of, wishful genie thinking, borders on blasphemy and witchcraft and things of that nature. The question really comes down to what is your intention and where's your heart at? What are you doing this for? If you're doing it, if there's things that you need to develop your spiritual mission in life, if you're in alignment with your spiritual values, things will come about a lot quicker. You won't hardly even think about things before they manifest in some way. It's really about becoming in alignment with the universe. And how you do that is by taking on the thoughts that are common to the universal mind, the mind of God. Jesus thought it nothing to share mind with God. So if you know the way God thinks, which you do know, if you've ever cracked open a Bhagavad Gita, if you've ever cracked open a Holy Bible, perhaps you've cracked it open, maybe that's not enough. Read the Proverbs, learn what wisdom is, get knowledge, get understanding, get wisdom. This is the universal language of the mind of God. He's thinking in these terms. The paradigm of infinite life versus the transient life, these transcendent thoughts, these are common to the mind of God. And when we think through this, as days go by, we get a momentum, or we start to develop a velocity in the reaction time between when we think a thought and how it manifests. If you've ever had a thought and then a car drives by that has it on this bumper sticker, whatever you were thinking about, and immediately you remember you were just thinking about that. And what a curious thing that is, because this is the first time you've thought about that in years or ever. And as a matter of fact, within 24 to 48 hours or so of that, you're seeing this manifestation of it outside of yourself that you've never seen before. So of all times and places, and as our old friend Adam Jeffrey would say, this coincidence, or this dance of manifestations, of synchronicities. These are manifestations of God's presence, or that we are on the right track, that you are in alignment with the mind of God. And so as you get going, it gets faster and faster. things manifest quicker and quicker, and your bigger hopes and dreams start to come into manifestation. So it's really worthwhile to point out that, again, without a vision, the people perish. Make goals lists. I feel throughout the years I've created many goals lists. On many occasions, I just wrote out all the things that I wanted to accomplish, and then I put it away, and then another one, and then another one. And the more goals you set, the more things that can come into fulfillment. But also, it sets destinations for your mind to take you. And a lot of times what will happen is, especially with your big goals, that your visions that you're setting out for yourself, I've seen, at least my life has worked in patterns of sometimes, 2 years for the big ones. So I have it, and it's almost 2 years to the day that something big manifests. And when these big things finally come and make it to you, they come completely dressed up in a bunch of smaller goals. So you'll want, there's something that you wanted to attain unto, or there's an experience that you wanted to have, a life experience that you wanted to have. And all of a sudden, it comes by way of a very specific type of person that you also wanted to know, or specific, it comes through circumstances that are also blessing you. So it's like, oh, here's an experience that you're going to get that you always wanted, through a job that you always wanted, in a town that you always wanted, and you don't even realize it. Like I used to sing, walking in Memphis all the time. Oh, I'm in Memphis. Okay. I used to, there was a time when I worked at, and it's weird things, limitless stories about how things have come into manifestation through song, okay, which you rest your mind into, okay, not just singing. Singing is a great way. That's why you gotta be also mindful of what you're singing about. Hey, what's on the radio? Breakup song. I don't need you. I'm over you. I got another girl on the side. And what is the world full of? It's full of heartbreak and adultery and endless sadness and instability and lack of marriage and promiscuity. But then on the flip side, you could be overwriting all the songs that you're singing with new lyrics. So, if you really got your own songs, change the lyric and sing them and make them happy things. But sometimes, I remember this one time I was working at a Subway, and there was a song that was always playing, and there was a song about, I got me some Bapin Apes. I don't know what this guy's talking about. It was like a rap type song, I got me some Bapin Apes. Ooh, Superman, I don't know which one it was. And then I used to sing all the time, like, oh, Bapin Apes. I didn't know what he was talking about. Well, it turns out he was talking about something called bathing apes. So one day, I'm with my friends, and we go into this gas station on our way somewhere, and in the store is this giant pyramid of all these shoes. And at this top of the pyramid is this big pair, because I'm size 13, this big pair of transparent shoes. So they're made of plastic, transparent plastic, with like green on them, and they were awesome looking. And I said, whoa, those are so cool. And I walked over, and I was like, whoa, these are crazy, and they're called bathing apes. I can't remember if it even hit me or what. I think it hit me while I was in the store even. And then it turns out the only pair they had was in size 13. So here I saw this thing that I instantly resonated with, which is awesome, which is right smack in front of me in this pyramidal shape. The only size they had was in my size, and it's the bathing apes that I had been singing about, hadn't realized. And they were on sale. I guess, you find it anywhere. Things can come to you through any means if you just... It's not about how you get it. It's not even about having, needing money for these things. They will find their way into your life. It's I bought them, and I loved them. They ended up cracking kind of and stuff, but they were cool. You can see my socks right through. It was a weird shoe. Never heard of it. And it was that song that I'd been singing. Ton of examples like that, okay? So the point is, what you're running through your head, it's going to bring it about. So vision boards. Vision boards work. Tell you the story. One time I made a vision board, and I had on there, so welcome to Kenya. I cut it out of a magazine, and there was a Four Seasons jet, and I said, oh, okay. Now, mind you, I'm not telling you y'all should take this route necessarily. I'm just giving you an example to tell you this stuff. It works. And if you're going to do nothing else, then remember that without a vision, the people perish, and that God gives you the desires of your heart, fine. But I don't want to, necessarily get into the preaching of the prosperity gospel or of, the manifestation of things that, nice and balanced. In order to make people materialistic, because that's not the goal. Though, you might already be having success with vision boards. I got into all this with the secret stuff, but the bigger thing is, anyway, I'm trying to decide whether I should go back and finish the story. No, I'm not going to go finish the story. Let's go. Actually, no, I think this has become a distraction for me. I'll go back to the way it was. There. So, now I will go back and finish the story. So anyway, there was like there was a shark cage. I mean, shark cage diving. There was another woman walking around with a hand in hand with an orangutan and all this kind of stuff. Okay. Australia, there was a kangaroo. I have this board somewhere, I believe somewhere. And so within a couple weeks, I ended up learning, hey, we're going to Australia. We're going to Africa. We're going to Kenya. Oh, and by the way, we're staying at the Four Seasons. Oh, that's the queerest thing. Staying at the Four Seasons in the Serengeti. We ended up taking a hot air balloon, flying above the Four Seasons in a hot air balloon safari. So there's the flying Four Seasons. It's weird how that manifests, but things like literally find through the mind, they come about. I ended up shark cage diving. I ended up walking and making hand-to-hand contact with a silverback gorilla. We weren't supposed to. I was trekking silverback gorillas in the Rwandan and Ugandan foothills of Tanzania. Okay. So, or not Tanzania, Rwanda, obviously. But that was one of the places we were going too. So anyway, all these things manifested from the board, okay? So the point is, got a vision, something's going to happen. One of my old coworkers, I'd say old coworkers, he was elderly actually, we're not going to name names though, good friend of mine. His son had a vision board, and he told me about that. He put that car, the DeLorean, only place anybody ever knows from is Back to the Future. That car, that's called a DeLorean if you didn't know. Well, he wanted one. He cut one out of an Auto Trader magazine and put it on his board. Years pass. He puts the board away, forgets about it. Then, years later, he ends up actually acquiring a DeLorean. Oh, man. Law of attraction or what? What is that? Well, then he finds that board, and it was an actual advertisement from an Auto Trader. So the VIN number evidently was on it. And so he had this feeling, I should check. I don't know why. I want to go check that. Okay, he checked it, and yeah, it was the exact same car. Same VIN number. In the secret, one of the guys on there, what's his name? He had a mansion that he had put on his vision board 5 years later. He opens up a box which had his old vision board on there. He was living in that exact same house. So, I mean, you're going to track things right down to the very exact thing. And so you can also construct, like, from scratch, like, certain circumstances. Put your face in somebody else's body doing something. And you will find yourself in these circumstances. Just life pulls itself together in a way that'll manifest the things that you're thinking about. So be careful what you're thinking about. And on the flip side, focus on what you do want. Hold to what is good and let go of the rest, like the Bible says. All right. Now, all that's good and well, and that may help you find provision in terms of your finances, in terms of life experience and things like that, which is really important. And it's easy to say that's not important when you haven't had those sorts of things. So I'm not going to dismiss anybody who's saying that, there's still things and stuff they want to experience in life. Like I said, God gives you the desires of your heart. You got a vision. Things can happen. Well, also, though, we have to be mindful that what's more important than anything you can experience. You don't want to be the richest man in the graveyard. Okay, you can have all the money in the world, but if your soul's lost, you're going to move into the spirit world, diminished spiritually, blind, unable to see. The attainment of the kingdom of heaven needs to happen while you're in the body in order for you to access it in the spiritual world in terms of consciously maintaining access to it. Maybe you don't attain unto it in this life and you go through heaven as part of, a orientation or something like that, but you're not going to stay there. Like, the refinement has to happen in this dense material body, and that's why the whole thing of reincarnation is occurring. That you can continue to refine yourself. That's not to say that there's no judgment day, because the reincarnation cycles don't go on forever. There's a definite end to the cycle of being born and dying. And once that ends, if you're not developed enough to be where you need to be, then you're going to get stuck in a lower stage of being when the world's on their next epoch. So we're on to the Jupiter age, and now you're a plant spirit because you couldn't become a human in the next epoch because you didn't develop, or you're some sort of gnome or imp or something like that. I don't know. These are things that can happen to people, and the beings that we experience as this are today, are commissioned into those jobs because, maybe they didn't make it from past epochs to continue their development. So if you're a human right now, you're very lucky. You're very fortunate in a sense to be able to think, not knowing who you were in past lives, but you made enough provision for yourself that you can maintain a human body and to continue to develop yourself. So don't throw it all away now. But every epoch, every age, every incarnation, a good chunk of us, threw away a lot of possibilities. So you really want to take conscious control of that and save yourself. Again, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. So we have a personal responsibility to do that, not just waiting around, for God to just have his mercies on us. We have development that we need to do meanwhile. And so that's important to point out. But we need to be focused on our spiritual development. So if you're trying to attain unto the kingdom of heaven or spiritual realities, don't give up. Keep searching. And I'm going to give you the clues to what my continued searching has found that bore fruit for me. And it may not be right for you. You may not be ready for it. It may be years, and you may come across the same path. You may spend your life working on something else. Who knows? I don't know. But I'm going to suggest Rudolf Steiner to y'all, rudolfsteineraudio.com. Anthroposophy. This is a school of spiritual science. This is the teaching of spiritual science from a mystical Christian format. So Christianity as Mystical Fact is one of Steiner's first books. He wasn't necessarily particularly Christian or what when he developed his spirituality, but it's because of his experiences in the spirit world, seeing Christ and seeing these spiritual stories and from the Akashic records of the Bible that he realized the truths of it. And so he has a lot of commentaries and things on the Gospel of John and things like that in all the Gospels and also all the religious books of the world, the Bhagavad Gita and several others, even Faust, is a big one. He followed, Goethe around. Not around, but he followed his work. He came around 100 years after him or so. And so so he's finding the connection with these writings to the spiritual world and correlating it as a path of initiation, taking the ancient things, everything from, the Celtics or from the Atlantean period or from the Egyptian period, from the Indo-Chaldean period or whatever, the Greco-Roman period. They all had their different myths, legends, initiation techniques. And the way that each of them were being taught at these different periods and the methods were appropriate for those people of that culture and for the stage of development that those people were in. And that's important to note because we don't all see now and think the way that we did in prior epochs, in 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, back. And as a matter of fact, the further back you go, the more of what is called a atavistic clairvoyance or an ancient clairvoyance. People natively all around, everybody could see the beings of the spirit. They interacted with both physical and spiritual beings simultaneously. And then as we started to move up through time, and as the reason and rationality and the intellectuality developed in humankind that wasn't there before, all of a sudden that clairvoyance faded away. And now we're all like super intellectual and we're all science-based and, we don't see spirit, we don't believe in it because we can't see it. And it's exactly because we have this ability to think in this frontal lobe sense that we also have lost that native clairvoyance. That doesn't mean we can't get back to it, but it just means it doesn't come pre-installed, natively installed in your body package. So we also need to develop the clairvoyant abilities to move back into that native state. So you're not trying to get to somewhere new, you're trying to get to somewhere old. You're not trying to uncover a far off land. You're trying to re-see what has only been veiled between you, but what still always surrounds us as it always has. And so the methods used for the different worlds and times have been different. Now anthroposophy offers its take on the best methods for attaining these dimensional states of consciousness. So if you are wanting to develop and go into that direction, it's good to know that there is actually methods available, readily available and freely available to help you. I used to work at the Church of Scientology, and we had people paid tens, $20,000 more, $50,000 for this auditing. What is auditing? These methods for basically doing. Now, mind you, I'm not working there anymore, and there's a reason why not. I was dismissed in spite of their own policies, which I pointed out to them. They were off policy, and I hope they did their own. They did their own reports on each other after I pointed out that they were scamming their own system. I don't know if they were trying to trick me by telling me that I was being dismissed in spite of the fact that I had gone through staff status 0, 1, and 2. And after you go through staff status 1 and 2, which are the policy letters and courses that you have to go through and you get certified in, and they actually make it so you can't just get kicked out. Like, you have to go through what's called the Committee of Evidence. And, of course, they didn't think I knew anything about that. They forgot that I had learned that, and I don't know. I don't want to get back into that. But I did tell them, look, after I pointed that out to them and they offered me that, I said, look, I don't want to be here if I'm not wanting here. Y'all are going to fight till you get your way, and I need to let God take me. And so, anyway, it was a good thing that I left. But it was also a good thing, I think, that I was there. It was a great experience for me. I loved it. And I don't say anything... I try not to say anything wrong about any religion, okay? I would advise against, certain satanic practices and things like that. But the methods and how people were attaining spiritual states there, it has a lot of commonality with how people are attaining them in all cultures, okay? Except it was, very codified, technical, and things like that. But, of course, you got to realize who L. Ron Hubbard was, who he studied under, and the kinds of works that he studied in order to understand the influence of his work and how he came to his abilities and knowledge. So once you get in there, you're not really free to study these people that he himself studied. You're not really free to study these ancient things. They tell you are, but as soon as you start to get too much into it, it gets very unscientological very quickly. So that's all I say about that. And as you all know, probably they're very litigious. They sue over the smallest sort of stuff. They sue more people than anybody else. So I don't want to say too much, but suffice it to say, there's plenty enough information available out there. And again, I don't have beef with them. But there is something to be learned from the methods from every religious sector. And if you learn a little bit about all of their initiation techniques, it will really clue you in on what's important for attaining these states. And the common themes will become very emboldened in your head. And through that study, you'll probably make a lot of progress toward those things, and then you'll have a lot of experiences. So I encourage the study of comparative religion, and anthroposophy encourages that study. And there's a lot written on it. The reading of the Bible is very much encouraged. The reading of the Bhagavad Gita is encouraged. The reading of everything is encouraged. But anyway, with all that said, also what's important, though, is that we keep things in context, because if you want to go into another dimension, you got to have good techniques, okay? Techniques that work for you. Now, it's something I want to bring up real quick, baptism, for instance. Good old-fashioned baptism. Steiner describes John the Baptist's state. Remember, they had an atavistic clairvoyance back then, but his also was the elevated state of consciousness. Still not yet the kingdom of heaven level. He was the greatest among men, but still, the least in the kingdom of heaven was greater than him. So he was like top of the weight class of us, but just under the lowest of the kingdom of heaven. But he would see in the etheric when he was baptizing somebody, holding them underwater, their etheric body beginning to lift itself and separate from the physical body. And that would be at the stage when he would bring them up. So when you're drowning or having any sort of near-death experience and one's life flashes before their eyes and the whole life, appears as a tableau before them of, pictures of moments from beginning to end and significant experiences. And then when a person comes back, that is enough of a spiritual experience for a lot of people, at least through that baptismal method, for them to know enough about the spiritual world to begin to walk toward the spiritual life, surrendering their carnal concerns. So when you're talking about people who've had these near-death experiences who are maybe atheists or maybe skeptics or maybe they were loose believers, but that experience made them, now they're on fire for God. Now they're on fire for the spiritual path, for pursuing righteousness or whatever. Some people come about those experiences in all kinds of different ways. So the point is, sometimes getting shot into these dimensions and then coming back can bring about the motivation for an awakening to pursue the right thing. And that's happening through different means. Here's an interesting book. DMT, the Spirit Molecule. Rick Strassman did these tests on people. You may have heard this. Everybody knows about this. If you don't know about it, you're out of the loop. That's plain. But no, seriously. The pineal gland, thought to be the seat of the soul, produces what's called DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which is thought to be the amino acid, I believe it is, that produces all of the effects that how you experience this dimension in color, with depth. All of those factors come about to the production of dimethyltryptamine. Spiritual experiences, near-death experiences, when you're being born, when you're dying, all that flooding of the DMT. And then the Zen Buddhist monks, the people who are being monitored and they're watching their levels and things like that, who go into deep meditation or having mystical experiences, it's because of that. And then also it's found in your psychoactive psychedelics and things like ayahuasca and things that are used ceremonially in order for people to develop spiritual cognition or to have these experiences. And that is the active ingredient. So, there's a documentary on it. You should really become a little bit knowledgeable on it. But that is how even secular science is getting a grip on the mystical experience. So once a person has that, though, I don't know who wants to live in that state of mind where they are dependent on such a thing like that in order, to live a spiritual life. But that could wake somebody up to knowing that there's something beyond, and that could motivate or galvanize their spiritual search for the kingdom of heaven. And in that way, then you start to search out not just the religious text, but a deep mystical text. You want the deepest information because you want an actual breakthrough in your meditation. You don't want to just sit there and just chant or, stare at your navel or what. But, I spent a lot of time meditating on nothing, on the back of my eyelids. There was a period I was getting up, when I would wake up at 3 or in the morning or so, and I'd go in my closet and just, in the darkest space when my brain was still half dreaming, doing meditations. And the most I ever really got out of that was just this purple cloud coming and just going and disappearing and coming and going, this sort of action. And it was neat, and it was a phenomena. It was curious, but I wasn't feeling like I was going anywhere with it. So I don't want to discount these little experiences, but I wanted to blast into another world. Well, that requires the development of your faculties. And so you can do that through things like Steiner's writings, How to Know Higher Worlds. That's what I'll recommend to you today. That book absolutely changed my life. Of course, in conjunction with a lot of other things that had happened up to that time, but that will give you everything you need to know. Listen to the audiobook. If you can't read, if you can't seem to get through a couple pages, you think you'll get the book and then you put it down after a couple pages. How to Know Higher Worlds, go to rudolfsteineraudio.com, get it for free, download it or whatever, stream it. and then played over and over and over. That's what I did. Probably my fourth listen is by the time I snapped out of my complacency with my non-meditation before I activated what I told you about last episode and actually going into another world. Now, I can't speak highly enough of it, and all of Steiner's writings are super vitally important. You can't see back there. I got a row Steiner, and highly recommend it. His speech, he's a very accelerated master, came at a very important time at the end of what's called the Kali Yuga stage, and in preparing us for this next age that we're going through. But anyway, I'd say it's neither here nor there, but it is actually very significant. So, we've covered vision boards. We've covered a bit about the importance of pursuing spiritual realities. Now, let's talk about spiritual realities again, getting in there and through meditation. Now, last episode I did talk to you about the method that I used, but there are a lot of different types of meditations and things that a person needs to do. There's certain preparatory stages and what's called the calendar of the soul that Steiner recommends, where on Sunday there's certain thoughts, there's a day of right judgment and a day of right thinking and a day of right deeds. And there's like 3 or 4 bullets or nuggets for each of those days. And they really just are about you focusing on those days and those aspects of your development. So a constant general development is necessary. Now, in Freemasonry and other traditions, a background in the liberal arts, everything from math and geometry and things like this, the arts, okay. These are also considered a prerequisite. I don't have it in front of me, and I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden right now. But you know what the liberal arts are. Hopefully you're smarter than me, okay? This program is for people who are smarter than me, okay? And if you're not smarter than me, good. Then you don't know what I didn't tell you. Okay, but anyway, the moral of the story is there's basic development of knowledge. That's not to say of necessarily worldly knowledge. There is a use for the worldly knowledge and things like that, but we need to be pursuing spiritual things with a spiritual focus, because you can become really smart, you can get a lot of degrees in a lot of different things, you can become a multi-billionaire president, not naming names, you know who you are, and I don't really have an opinion about all that with Trump or whatever, but even though I know everybody has an opinion, but I think we all need to be focused on our personal development, honestly. I think right now, as long as I'm going political, because I think in the future we're going to be talking about the threefold social order, where we talk about the economic, the rights political life, and the spiritual life of humanity. We need to be focused on, like Martin Luther King Jr. said. I got those parts wrong. He says, he who does not have a cause for which he is willing to die is not fit to live. So if we're not concerning ourselves with a cause that we're willing to die for, and what are you willing to die for that's here on earth? There's nothing here on earth that's we should be willing to die for, except for the truth, except for heaven, the kingdom of heaven, the sharing of that sort of thing. We'll die for love, obviously, well, most of us would die at least for somebody, if not everybody we love, if not, maybe we're totally altruistic and we die for the world or whatever. But we have a responsibility to pursue spiritual things here, so make that the focus of your journey. Now, one thing I have to say, to be fair, okay, I guess, I have a natural inclination towards this. Some people have natural inclination towards whatever, maybe it's math, maybe it's football, maybe it's stitching, some sort of social cause, civil rights, something or another. Okay. But back of that, no matter what it is, one can still develop their spiritual life, because that is something we have in common. We might not all be into football. Okay. I, for one, am not a fan. Okay. I think, well, I'll just leave it at that. But it doesn't mean that people who are into it are necessarily wrong. Now, people who are into sports, for instance, according to Steiner, tend to be more of the earth, and the more they play these grungy sports where they're banging up against each other, and the sweat and all this interaction with the earth, the more they really are, in a sense, binding themselves to the earth. But maybe for this incarnation it's necessary. People can't help it. They have athletic inclinations. I do not have athletic inclinations. I have the inclination to read a book and to be left alone. I was kidding. But athlete has a soul, just like anybody else. Take Tim Tebow, for instance. I actually ran into him in Kathmandu December before last, which is 2019, so it's 2017 when that happened. And we were in Kathmandu. And actually, I think in my Vedic astrology actually had said that you're going to run into somebody famous. And I was like, oh, man, that's weird. When that happens, I'm going to be in Kathmandu. Ain't nobody I know going to be. Maybe they're like a Bollywood actor or something. And then one day I was going to breakfast at my hotel there in Kathmandu, Nepal. And I'm walking to my table. And there's this guy sitting at this table. Like, his face looks super familiar. I just stood there for a second like, oh, Tim Tebow. I'm like, is that his name? I don't think I'd ever even said his name out loud. So I just knew it. And then it came to my mouth, and I'm like, that sounds right. That's his name. I was like, that's him. So I sat down, and we were like, one of my friends was taking pictures of me with him in the background. And he turned around and saw it. And then first his mom came over and talked to us, and then he did. And then he said, oh, what's going on, man? Because I asked, oh, take a picture. You're going to sign and take a picture. Okay, cool. Novelty. Here's why I tell that story, because Tim Tebow is that one of those rare ones where, as he's known for being a virgin, which, until he was married. He's known for his religious devotion. He's known for that game where he threw 316 yards, John, like 316. He wore the 316 under his eye, and then he ran 316, and there was like 5 or something synchronicities in a single game surrounding the 316 phenomena. So there's a person that's just devoted to the spiritual life who's still doing these other things. So no matter what you do, singers, musicians, there's, actors, no matter what you do, you can have a spiritual life developing. And the more that you develop your esoteric side, the more successful that you'll become. Because it's not just that you'll have spiritual experiences, but that, the force is with you. So when you have a thought or a desire, or you apply yourself, there's favor on you. And people help you, and they admire you, they're attracted to you, they don't know why. Just that is just the general benefit of aligning yourself with the mind of God. So, with that said, there's no excuse why someone shouldn't pursue spirituality just because they're not religious or what. And, scriptures say, blessed is he who sees and believes, but even more blessed is he who does not see and who believes. Now, I know sometimes I make these statements and it sounds a bit braggadocious to say, oh, I've had these spiritual experiences growing up, okay, that come to me. My grandma came to me, a vision of this being here and there, and these sorts of things that have happened. But to the point of the people who haven't, okay, or to, their benefit, I should also say, even more blessed are you who, having not seen, still believe and pursue the kingdom of God. Because I had that. It really did spur me on to take literally the call to seek ye first the kingdom of God, which led to Steiner and these other things. But if you've always craved that and you haven't had that, well, you're even doubly blessed. Even better it's going to be for you when you start to have these experiences, if you'll just start pursuing it based on your faith, based on what you hope, okay? Your hope will not return back. You will get what you're hoping for if you pursue it. So, obviously, if you're watching the show, listening rather, here on the podcast, then you probably already have a feeling for this. You're already into it. So, I'm not going to try to sell it to you, but it's just really encouraging. It just makes me feel so good inside. And anyway, so I think this episode has covered a lot of stuff, but it hasn't covered one issue that we all need to be discussing, and that is Christ in our religious pursuits. This is spiritual realities, okay? We got people listening with all sorts of spiritual inclinations. We got people who are pagans. We got people who are Wiccans. We got people who are Buddhists. We got people who are of whatever religious persuasion. And we've got people also who used to be Christian, who, searching a more spiritual life, decided, hey, I'm going to be spiritual, not religious. I'm going to be spiritual, non-dogmatic, non-denominational situation. And to me, it's a very sad thing that's happening, because people who once had a belief in Christ or Jesus have gone off thinking that because their church is not able to get them into a true state, because there's hypocrites in the church, because every church, there's 250,000 or a million, whatever, on every church corner, and yet there ain't no saints walking around like in the good old days, that somehow it's ineffective. Well, it might be. I mean, the scriptures do say in the end times, the churches will become the synagogues of Satan. And we do have a lot of, faithless teaching. We do have a lot of non-spiritual teaching. We have a lot of sermons which are 50% business of the day, 5% reading, and and a little bit of exposition out of that. And ultimately, it's just pointing towards, important, things like, do unto others, or, be kind to your neighbor. It just doesn't really hammer home the kingdom of heaven issue. And so, and really the kingdom of heaven is, made out of, I say that because it's on my mind, because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Yeah, love your neighbors as you love yourself. That's key. And so I do want to point out you should be loving your neighbors as yourself. And so let me just suggest, too, if you're listening, if you're mowing your lawn today and your neighbor's lawn is unmowed, mow it. Do stuff like that. If you're not already doing it, it's great. And it just brings out goodwill in people. And eventually they'll say, oh, well, why'd you do that? And you can always you got that great verse that's just so good to remind people, and you start to cultivate that relationship with them. You say, love your neighbor as yourself. Doing my duties. And you'll start to see them, treat you back, and it'll start a real good love thing. But anyway, back to what I was talking about. Christ can be found in the esoteric occult teachings, okay? That is a cornerstone, a capstone, a keystone, a pillar, okay? It's vital that you have that in there, and that you're not seeking out the spirituality divorced from that. That's a tragedy. Because you're going to have spiritual experiences, and you're going to go deep into it. You're going to think that it's the Christians or it's the Christ and all that was the problem. Then you're going to be lost. You're going to get in through a back door. You can't have salvation. You can't have the forgiveness of sins. Whoever is ashamed of me, I will be ashamed of. So if you can't talk about Christ, or you can't search that out because you feel like it's, too niche-y, or it's branded to a certain thing and you're on this other thing, I mean, how can we neglect so great? And if you think that, you're going to find it, salvation another way, like, great, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who actually start out without Christ, who develop themselves and have spiritual experiences. They develop their soul, they develop clairvoyance and things like this, and then they find Christ. There's cause and effect. There's evil people who manage to have great success. Why is God blessing them? They're evil. And then there's seems like great holy people who are poor and suffering and stuff. There's a cause and effect factor. If you do this, you'll have this effect, whether you're a good person or a bad person, whether you're a believer or a non-believer, whether you claim to believe or you claim, to be against. So, looking at people's experiences, or thinking that, you got to be free of this, organized religious dogma in order to have the spirituality that you desire, that's a misnomer. There's things you're not doing. There's things that believers aren't doing that's causing them to not have a full Christian, lives full of, love in their relationships and experiences and synchronicities and magic and miracles and visions and these sorts of things. And then there's certain things that others who are like, I'm, a witch, or I'm a, whatever they, Wiccan or whatever. And they're having these full spiritual lives. Okay. They're seeing into other dimensions or whatever. Or they're all in this foo-foo woo-woo. Okay. in either case, it's not complete. Yeah, in a sense, they might even be closer to God. The Bible says, you honor me with your lips, but your heart is far from me. So you could be honoring God with your lips, I'm a believer, but then your heart isn't in the pursuit of the kingdom of heaven or these other dimensions. And on the other hand, you got people who are, close to God in terms of personal development and their connection with, God and the universe and all the stuff that's around us and in these other planes, but they haven't made the Christ connection yet. Okay? In either case, and so, like we were talking about several shows ago, the throwing out of the baby with the bathwater. You think that, you're going to get rid of, this religiosity by getting rid of the denomination. Meanwhile, you're throwing out the Christ baby because you don't like the way it's been elucidated in that denomination. That Christ is just as necessary in every denomination, no matter how misrepresented it is. You need the Christ. So keep the baby alive, put it in put your understanding of the Christ in a fresh bowl of water. See what kind of soup comes off of that water. Find in terms of this is the Christ. This is what it spells out. This is what it means. The Christ means in our lives. This is the effect of the Christ. This is the powers of the Christ, and then find the denomination or somebody who matches that, so that way you can season your baby water, if you will. I don't know. I'm trying to make that into something, because getting rid of that is going to be a big problem for you later on if you think you're going to die and you're going to be confronted with Krishna, the Christus, or Christ, the Christos, and you're going to have gotten there by your own power, or your own works, or something. Because it is worth pointing out that, your sins are forgiven and the grace abounds, but you still do need to work on yourself. And likewise, with these, certain other spiritualist people who haven't received a love of Christ or whatever, they've worked on themselves, but they don't have the grace that's necessary to compensate for what they can't compensate for. So maybe you have the Christ and he's compensating for your sin punishment, but you forget about the faith without works is dead, or you forget about God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that too shall he reap. This karmic element. You think that God's grace is going to cover up those. No, those are also true. And so, and likewise, people think, I've, cleansed certain things out of my personality. There's certain punishments and things that have to come, that have to be sacrificed and atoned for. And that's what Jesus was all about, is the atonement. So anyway, I think, hopefully I haven't beat that horse too far, to death, but it is important that don't lose the plot. Don't forget. So maybe in a future episode, I think we're going to have more of an anthroposophical focus. Anthroposophy, we're talking about a knowledge of the spirit through a knowledge of mankind. And we'll probably have some anthroposophists on. We'll have Hazel Archer Ginsburg on, and she's a super awesome spiritual person. And now that I'm moving to Chicago, I'll be able to be with her a lot more in those up there. And they have a lot of spiritual insight and very technical kind of language about Steiner's teachings. But I think that's all. So I appreciate you listening today. God bless. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can write me at robert@newprecept.com. You can visit us at spiritualrealities.net, newprecept.com. Currently, same site, but I'm working on dividing those. And then also, if you have any conversating that you want to have done on your own podcast, in an interview, you want to talk about these things, let me know. If you have any speaking engagements you need somebody to talk about, let me know. I can help. All right. God bless. Stay tuned next week. Spiritual Realities out.